Michael Carter had always been a man of ambition. From the moment he stepped into the corporate world, he knew that success would not come easily. Late nights, grueling hours, and countless sacrifices had sculpted him into the man he was, a rising star in the marketing industry, respected by colleagues and feared by competitors. Yet for all his success, the one thing he had prided himself on the most was his marriage. Or so he had thought. The day his world shattered started like any other. Michael had wrapped up a critical presentation, one that would solidify his promotion to senior director. His phone buzzed just as he was shaking hands with the CEO, a message from his wife, Olivia. "We need to talk. Come home early." Michael's gut twisted. Those 4 words rarely preceded anything good. He rushed home, expecting anything but what he walked into. Olivia sat at the dining table, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression unreadable. Across from her sat Daniel, Michael's closest friend since college. "Michael," Olivia started, her voice devoid of warmth, "we need to be honest with you." The words that followed crushed him. Olivia and Daniel had been seeing each other behind his back for months. The woman he had built a life with, the man he had trusted like a brother. They had betrayed him in the cruelest way possible. Michael's body went numb as the confession unraveled. His mind screamed, demanding an explanation, but all he could hear was the blood pounding in his ears. When he finally found his voice, it was eerily calm. "Why?" he asked, barely recognizing his own voice. Olivia sighed, as if the weight of their affair had burdened her more than it had destroyed him. "Because I needed something more. You're always working, always chasing success. I needed to feel wanted. And Daniel, he was there." Michael turned to Daniel, his so-called best friend. "And you?" His voice was a knife's edge. Daniel had the audacity to look guilty. "It just happened, Mike. I never meant to hurt you." Michael laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You never meant to hurt me. You destroyed everything. You made a choice. Both of you did." He stood up, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Get out." The words were sharp, cold, leaving no room for argument. "Both of you." Olivia hesitated. "Michael, we need to talk about—" "I said get out!" he roared, his control finally snapping. The raw pain in his voice silenced them. Without another word, they left, and as the door clicked shut behind them, Michael was left standing in the ruins of his life. That night, he sat alone in the dark, staring at the wedding photos on the mantel. The life he had built, the dreams he had held onto so tightly, had crumbled in an instant. But amidst the wreckage of his marriage, something inside him ignited, a burning resolve. They had taken everything from him, but they would not take his future. Michael Carter was not a man who stayed down. If Olivia wanted him to fail, if Daniel thought he could replace him, then they had no idea who they were dealing with. This was not the end. This was only the beginning of his rise. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling of the life I had once known. Samantha and I barely spoke, existing under the same roof like strangers bound by an unspoken truce. The air between us was thick with tension, each conversation laced with an underlying hostility that neither of us cared to hide anymore. Every interaction was a reminder of how far we had fallen, how the love we once shared had decayed into something unrecognizable. One evening, I came home late from work, exhausted, but feeling a sense of accomplishment. My boss had praised my latest project, and there was even talk of a promotion. For the first time in a long while, I felt like my career was finally aligning with the vision I had for myself. But as I stepped through the front door, that moment of pride was quickly extinguished. Samantha was waiting for me in the living room, arms crossed, eyes cold. "We need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. I sighed, already anticipating another argument. "All right, what is it this time?" She took a deep breath as if preparing for battle. "This isn't working. You're never here. You're always at work, always chasing something, and I'm just here alone." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep my frustration at bay. "I told you, Sam, I'm doing this for us. For our future." "No, you're doing this for yourself," she snapped. "You're choosing your job over me, over our marriage. I asked you to quit months ago, and you ignored me. You made your choice. I stared at her, disbelief morphing into anger. You wanted me to throw away my career because you were unhappy. That's not love, Sam, that's control. Her jaw tightened. Maybe I just wanted to know that I was more important to you than some paycheck. I let out a humorless laugh. It was never about the money. It was about building something for myself, about having a purpose beyond just being your husband. Silence settled between us, heavy and suffocating. And then she said the words that changed everything. Met someone. The world around me tilted, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. What? I didn't plan for it to happen, she continued, her voice softer now, almost regretful. But I was lonely, and he was there. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, a whirlwind of emotions so intense I could barely breathe. Betrayal. Anger. Sadness. But beneath it all there was something else, a realization that perhaps this was inevitable. I nodded slowly, my voice eerily calm. So that's it then? Samantha hesitated, as if she expected me to fight, to beg her to stay. But I had no energy left for battles that were already lost. I think we should separate, I said, and the words felt both like a death and a rebirth. She looked at me, a flicker of something like guilt crossing her face. Are you sure? I exhaled, feeling an unexpected weight lift from my shoulders. Yeah, I am. That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't look back. As I walked out of the home we had built together, I realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of something new, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The weeks that followed were a test of my resilience. In the solitude of my new apartment, I faced the echoes of a life that had been shattered. The silence was different here, not oppressive, but contemplative. For the first time in years, I had space to think, to breathe, to rediscover who I was before my world had been defined by someone else's expectations. Work became my sanctuary. Every hour spent in the office was another brick laid in the foundation of my rebirth. I poured myself into projects, taking on responsibilities that had once seemed daunting. Late nights turned into early mornings, and before I knew it, I had positioned myself as an indispensable force within my company. My boss took notice. Colleagues who had once overlooked me now sought my advice, and soon whispers of a major promotion began circulating. But success in my professional life did not erase the scars of betrayal, the anger, the sadness, the humiliation. They clung to me like shadows, waiting for quiet moments to strike. I refused to let them consume me. Instead, I harnessed them, using every painful memory as fuel to push forward. Determined to reclaim my personal life as well, I reconnected with the parts of me that had been neglected. I dusted off my guitar, fingers stumbling over long-forgotten chords. I started reading again, immersing myself in stories that reignited my imagination. I joined a gym, channeling frustration into strength. Slowly, I rebuilt myself, not just professionally, but emotionally, mentally, and physically. One evening, an old friend invited me out for drinks. It had been years since I had socialized outside the confines of a marriage that had quietly suffocated my individuality. I hesitated, but then I realized I had nothing to lose. The bar was lively, filled with the hum of conversation and laughter. As I sat among friends, trading stories, and rediscovering the comfort of genuine companionship, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. It was in that moment that I saw her, Emma. She wasn't striking in an obvious way, but there was an effortless confidence about her that caught my attention. She moved through the crowd with ease, her laughter light, uninhibited. When our eyes met, she smiled, and something in my chest shifted. For the first time since my marriage had crumbled, I felt the stirrings of something new, not just attraction, but possibility. We talked for hours that night. She was sharp-witted, passionate about her work, and refreshingly honest. She didn't shy away from asking difficult questions, nor did she offer empty reassurances. When I told her about my past, she listened, not with pity but with understanding. "It sounds like you lost yourself for a while," she said, swirling her drink thoughtfully. "But it also sounds like you're finding your way back." And she was right. I wasn't the man I had been a year ago. I wasn't the broken husband begging for clarity from a woman who had chosen someone else. I was stronger, wiser, more determined than ever to shape my own destiny. As the night wound down, Emma leaned in slightly, her voice softer now. "So, what's next for you?" The question lingered in the space between us. For the first time in a long time, I had an answer. "Whatever I want," and I meant it. The days following my decisive moment of self-liberation felt like stepping into uncharted territory. The weight of betrayal still lingered in my mind, but it no longer had the power to control me. Instead, it served as fuel for my newfound determination. I had spent too long questioning my worth, second-guessing my choices, and allowing someone else's needs to overshadow my own. Now, I was finally ready to reclaim my life on my own terms. I immersed myself in work with an intensity I had never known before. Every project, every meeting, every challenge became an opportunity to prove to myself that I was more than what she had tried to reduce me to. My efforts did not go unnoticed. My boss, who had always been supportive but cautious, began entrusting me with greater responsibilities. Clients responded enthusiastically to my ideas, and for the first time in years I felt truly valued, not because of who I was in a relationship, but because of who I was as a professional. Beyond my career, I also began investing in myself in ways I had long neglected. I rediscovered old passions. The guitar collecting dust in the corner of my apartment found its way back into my hands, and the notes I strummed resonated with a freedom I had almost forgotten. I started running again, feeling the pavement beneath my feet as a reminder that every step forward was a victory over the past. Most importantly, I sought therapy, not because I was broken, but because I refused to carry the weight of resentment and pain into my future. Socially, my world also began to shift. Friends who had once seemed distant, either by my own isolation or because of the controlling nature of my past relationship, welcomed me back with open arms. They had seen my struggle, even when I had been blind to it. Over drinks, dinners, and late-night conversations, I started to piece together the reality of what I had endured. They reminded me of who I had been before I was manipulated into thinking my dreams were selfish, before I had been convinced that love meant sacrificing myself completely. One night, sitting with an old friend at a rooftop bar, he said something that stuck with me. "You were never the problem, man. You just forgot how to put yourself first, and now that you remember, there's nothing stopping you." That was the moment it truly clicked. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The version of me that had been stifled, silenced, and second-guessed was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned his worth the hard way, who had faced betrayal and come out stronger for it, and then, as if the universe itself wanted to test my growth, she called. Her voice, once so familiar, now felt like a relic of another life. I don't know what happened," she stammered. "I thought I had it all figured out, but everything is falling apart. I lost my job, the people I thought would support me. They're gone. And I let her words wash over me, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a quiet understanding. She was finally facing the consequences of her choices, the choices that had left me shattered once before. I miss you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I miss us." A past version of me might have hesitated, might have entertained the idea that things could be repaired, that love was worth fighting for at any cost. But that man was gone. In his place was someone who had rebuilt himself from the ground up, someone who knew that some bridges are better left burned. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said simply, "but I've already found mine." I ended the call feeling lighter than I had in years. The past no longer held me captive. My story was no longer about loss or betrayal. It was about strength, growth, and the limitless possibilities that lay ahead. As I stood there looking out at the city lights stretching into the horizon, I knew one thing for certain: I was free. The moment of reckoning arrived on a crisp autumn evening, much like the night that had shattered my old life. I found myself standing in front of my former home, a place that had once symbolized love, commitment, and the future I had envisioned, with Sarah. But now it was nothing more than bricks and mortar, stripped of the warmth that had once made it a home. I had come to retrieve the last of my belongings, the remnants of a life I no longer claimed as my own. The divorce was finalized, the papers signed, and with them the final ties to the woman who had betrayed me were severed. It was supposed to be just another step in the process, but as I walked through the house, I was unexpectedly confronted with ghosts of the past. The framed photos on the wall, the indentation of my spot on the couch, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air, it all threatened to pull me back into a sea of emotions I had fought so hard to escape. Sarah was there, of course. She watched me from across the room, her eyes searching for something, regret, forgiveness, maybe even a second chance. But I had nothing left to give her. She had already taken too much. "For you look good, Caleb," she said, breaking the silence. I didn't reply. What was there to say? That I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, that while she had floundered, lost in the wreckage of her choices, I had risen higher than ever before. That every ounce of pain she had inflicted had only fueled my transformation. Instead, I simply nodded, collected my things, and walked toward the door. "Wait," she called out, her voice tinged with desperation. "Can we talk?" I turned, taking in the woman who had once held my heart in her hands, only to crush it without a second thought. I saw the regret in her eyes, the understanding of what she had lost, but it didn't matter anymore. The past was behind me, and I had no intention of looking back. "There's nothing left to say, Sarah," I replied. "You made your choices, I made mine, and I think we both have to live with them." Her lips parted as if to protest, but I was already walking away, leaving behind not just a house, but an entire chapter of my life that no longer served me. The weeks that followed felt lighter, as if I had been carrying an invisible weight all this time, and had only now realized how heavy it had been. I poured myself into my career, my newfound passions, and the life I was building on my own terms. Every day felt like a step further from the pain, a step closer to the man I had always been meant to become. Opportunities flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was invited to speak at industry conferences, sharing not just my expertise, but my story, the journey of resilience and self-reinvention. To my surprise, my words resonated with people. I received messages from men and women who had faced their own betrayals, their own moments of despair, and found solace in my journey. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a beacon for those still navigating the darkness. One evening, after delivering a keynote speech in Chicago, I found myself at a networking event, surrounded by influential figures in my industry. That's when I met Natalie. She was different from anyone I had encountered in a long time, sharp, confident, with a warmth that immediately put me at ease. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, devoid of pretense or hidden agendas. She had a way of making me forget about the past, about the wounds I had spent so long healing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir within me. Something I had almost forgotten was possible. "You have an incredible story, Caleb," she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "But what I admire most is that you didn't let it define you." I smiled, realizing in that moment how far I had come. "That's the thing about life," I said. "It doesn't stop for heartbreak, it just keeps moving. And if we're strong enough to keep up, we might just find something even better waiting on the other side." As the night unfolded, I found myself thinking less about the past and more about the future. Perhaps for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I was finally ready to start again. I returned home that weekend with a renewed sense of clarity. Standing on the balcony of my apartment, overlooking the city skyline, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the pain, the relentless pursuit of self-reclamation, it had all led to this moment. I no longer saw myself as a victim of Sarah's choices. I was the architect of my own destiny, the author of a new narrative, one defined not by loss but by triumph. The road ahead was mine to pave, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. With a deep breath, I raised my glass to the night sky, a silent toast to the past, the present, and the limitless future that lay ahead. Because This was just the beginning. As the weeks turned into months, the tension between Daniel and Lisa reached a boiling point. The unspoken resentments, the lingering betrayals, and the undeniable reality of their broken marriage could no longer be ignored. Daniel had grown tired of pretending, tired of shouldering the weight of a love that no longer existed. And Lisa? She was floundering in her own sea of consequences, her past decisions coming back to haunt her in ways she had never anticipated. One evening, Daniel came home to find Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an unopened bottle of wine. The exhaustion on her face was unmistakable, but Daniel no longer felt the pull to comfort her. "We need to talk," she said, her voice hollow. Daniel took a deep breath and sat across from her, knowing this moment had been inevitable. "I want to try again," Lisa began, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "I know I made mistakes, but we had something good once. We can fix this." Daniel studied her, searching for sincerity in her words. He saw regret, but not love. He saw fear, but not change. "Lisa, you didn't just make a mistake," he said, his tone steady but firm. "You made a choice. And that choice wasn't just about betrayal. It was about dismissing everything I stood for, everything I worked for." Tears welled in Lisa's eyes, but Daniel wasn't moved. He had cried his share of tears, spent his share of sleepless nights, questioning his own worth. "So that's it," she whispered. "You're just giving up?" Daniel exhaled, feeling the weight of years lift from his shoulders. "No, Lisa, I'm finally choosing myself." That night, Daniel packed his bags and left. He didn't slam doors or hurl accusations. He simply walked away, carrying only what was his, and leaving behind the remnants of a love that had died long ago. The weeks that followed were both liberating and terrifying. Daniel moved into a sleek new apartment overlooking the city, a space that was entirely his own. The silence, once daunting, became a source of peace. No more late-night arguments, no more walking on eggshells. He threw himself into his work with even greater intensity, not to escape, but to build. Every achievement, every project completed, felt like a brick in the foundation of his new life, and people noticed. His colleagues respected his focus. His superiors acknowledged his leadership, and before long, he was approached with an opportunity he had never expected, an offer to spearhead a new division in an international expansion. As Daniel weighed his decision, he realized something profound. His success was no longer about proving Lisa wrong. It was about proving himself right. He had always been capable. He had always been worthy. He had just forgotten that for a while. Lisa, on the other hand, spiraled. She reached out several times, texts, calls, even a letter, but Daniel had nothing left to give her. He wasn't cruel, he simply no longer needed to hear her explanations or apologies. Her chapter in his life was closed. One day, as Daniel sat on the balcony of his new home, sipping his morning coffee, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the rediscovery of his own strength, it had all led to this moment. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't in years: peace. The months that followed were a testament to how far I had come. Each day felt like another brick laid in the foundation of the new life I was building, one no longer overshadowed by betrayal, but instead shaped by resilience, ambition, and self-respect. The echoes of the past had faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the steady hum of progress and self-discovery. One of the most transformative changes was the complete shift in my mindset. No longer did I dwell on what had been lost. Instead, I focused solely on what was ahead. I had learned to appreciate solitude, to revel in my own company without the weight of unspoken doubts or the tension of an unfulfilled relationship pressing against me. My home, once a battlefield of painful memories, had become a sanctuary, a place of peace, creativity, and boundless possibility. With my career soaring, I found myself being approached for opportunities I had once only dreamed of. I was invited to speak at conferences, to mentor rising professionals, and to take on leadership roles that further cemented my influence in the industry. Colleagues who had once viewed me as just another diligent worker now recognized me as a force to be reckoned with, a leader forged through adversity, driven by an unshakable will to succeed. Despite my professional accomplishments, it was in my personal growth that I felt the most profound change. I no longer sought validation in a relationship. I had become my own source of fulfillment. I spent my free time rediscovering the passions I had set aside for so long, writing, hiking, even learning to cook meals that once felt like foreign territory. Each activity was a small personal victory, proof that I was more than just the sum of my past. Perhaps the most unexpected development came when I met someone new. It was not through forced effort or desperate searching, but rather in the most natural way possible, through shared interests and mutual understanding. She was different in every way from my ex-wife, and perhaps that was why I found myself drawn to her. She admired my strength, respected my independence, and saw me for who I truly was, rather than who she wanted me to be. This time, I was cautious. I did not rush, nor did I ignore the lessons I had learned. Trust was something to be earned, not blindly given, and I made sure that every step forward was one taken with clarity and intention. For the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of something real, not a desperate attempt to fill a void, but a genuine connection built on mutual respect and shared values. As the seasons changed once more, I found myself standing on the balcony of my high-rise apartment, looking out at the sprawling city below. The lights shimmered in the darkness, each one a reminder of the countless lives unfolding in their own unique way. My life, once defined by heartbreak and disillusionment, had become something greater than I had ever imagined. I had risen, not just from betrayal, but from the limitations I had once placed upon myself. My success was not just professional but personal. I had learned to love myself, to trust my own instincts, and to build a future that was entirely my own. And so, as I stood there, breathing in the crisp night air, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had pushed me to grow, for the failures that had shaped my resilience, and for the unwavering belief that no matter what life threw at me, I would always rise. This was not the end of my story. This was just the beginning of something extraordinary.